For this opportunity. Um, my name is Leslie Glustrom, and I am really grateful to have this opportunity to speak to League of Women Voters. You're an amazing group, and it's really powerful when you weigh in on issues. So this is a great honor. I'm a biochemist by training, but I've spent most of my life at the interface of science and society. I've been a science writer. I worked in the Wisconsin State Legislature. I've been a teacher. I've been a researcher. And in 2004, I'm also a mother of a couple of kids who are now in their 30s. In 2004, almost 20 years ago, I said, I'm no kind of mother if I don't do everything I can to address the looming climate crisis. You have all the soccer games and the ballet lessons and everything else you do for your kids. And I'm like, all of that doesn't really matter if we don't leave them a livable climate. So we'd gone through a lot of troubles as, disruptions as a family, but I went to my husband, I said, I want to quit my job to work full-time on climate change. This is back in 2003 now. And he looked at me like, you want to do what? And, about a year later, that happened. And my husband, who's a teacher, took on a lot of extra teaching and a lot of extra grading of papers. So I always say, don't thank me, thank my husband. And I've now worked way more than full-time on climate change since I began really in 2001, 2002. So it's the best part of 20 years. But I'm a citizen. I'm largely unpaid, but I've been doing this for a while, and having help from the League of Women Voters is huge as we move forward to address the climate crisis. So the short answer to our addressing the climate crisis, are we making progress in Colorado? And the answer is yes. And Amy Sherwood and I had some conversations. She spent a lot of time at the Capitol along with the rest of the League of Women Voters team, and we are definitely making progress. League of Women Voters is huge in that. But as you probably know, this is a race against time. So I'll be doing my best to kind of lay out a little bit of background about Clean Energy Action, my home group. There's all these other groups down at the bottom that you can see, and that's a small version of the list. Most of them, it's like CCLC, Colorado Coalition for a Livable Climate, or CCAN, Colorado Climate Action Network, or Colorado Renewable Energy Society. So they usually have something about climate or clean energy in their title. And the list keeps growing. We've now built a climate movement that will not be stopped in Colorado. And that is just incredibly, frankly, rewarding to me. The sad news, of course, is that we have big problems. So let's jump on in, and I'll stop every once in a while just to see if there's any kind of burning questions. We're not that big of a group. So if you do have a burning question, I'm okay if you unmute yourself and just sort of jump in and say, Leslie, what about this or what about that? And the presentation is probably about 40 minutes or so. Then we'll have time for some question and answer. So I'll just stop and just make sure. And I also hope that speaking of technical issues, sometimes it won't. It's been here for a while. Sometimes I have to stop sharing and then start sharing again. And then hope I can advance the slides. Oh, yeah. Okay, there we go. Clean Energy Action, which is a group that's based in Boulder, works at the local, state, and national level to accelerate the transition of the post-fossil fuel world. We are relatively small, and we made a decision a long time ago to focus on impact rather than on funding. We keep our budget extremely small, and we rely on what we call citizen power. We recruit people. You'll see a picture of a guy named Tom Asprey. He's a really successful electrical engineer. He's given us way over $500,000 worth of just plain volunteer work. And we do that with hundreds and hundreds of people. We just frankly get them to do this work because it's the defining work of our times. And we could never afford to pay Tom Asprey or any of the hundreds of other people that Shirley Jin and on. We can't afford to pay you. So we just encourage you, inspire you to do the work. We've worked in not all of the states, but you can see it about 2/3 of the state, plus communities all over Colorado. And as I look at the list of communities in Colorado, it's completely deficient, but you wouldn't be able to read the print if we did that. So one of our I'm sorry that this is it's a little blurry when you blow it up, but this is one of our mottos from Lao Tse. A leader is best when people barely know the leader exists. When the work is done, the aim fulfilled, they will say we did it ourselves. So always our goal when we work with communities, whether it's around Colorado or around the country, to really empower them to take the leadership, to do the work that needs to be done, to say the words that need to be said, to write the documents that need to be written. We don't try to brand them as clean energy action. We just try to inspire, train, and support them. And again, we've done that all over the state and all over the country pretty much. Mostly what we do is write long. If you were to search me, you'd find a lot of this sort of thing. This happens to be one set of testimony that I did was way back in 2008, but I spoke at the law school and this would impress them. So I decided to include it just because most of what we do is just talking and writing and talking and writing and talking and writing. I also included these pictures. On the left is a woman named Julie Zahnizer, who Shirley Jin knows. Shirley's on the call tonight. On the right is a young fellow named Connor May. This is now about 4 years ago. You may or may not be able to tell, but I think you can tell that this is a pretty somber room. And the person up in front is the CEO of Excel at the time. He's going to step down now in another month or two, Ben Folk. He's a pretty good guy, actually. But here's Julie speaking truth to power. And Connor, who at the time was about 24, something like that. This was a tough assignment. We had driven to Amarillo all night and all, did blah, blah, long story and got up and found our way here. And the next thing you know, they're speaking to the CEO of Excel during the annual board meeting. And they both did a magnificent job. So when your time comes to speak, you probably won't be speaking in an environment this intimidating, but I hope you would remember these pictures. Because really what we ask people to do is to talk. Now, there's lots of other things you can do also, but the thing we really need is a lot of people talking. So I hope you'll remember these pictures and that Julie and Connor had the courage to do this, and they did it. They did it magnificently. And it wasn't long afterwards that Ben Folk announced, we're going to put ourselves on an accelerated path of decarbonization. And it all adds up. It wasn't just Julie and Connor, but what they did was a significant part of it. I spoke that day too, but Ben Folk knows what I think. He hadn't heard from Julie or Connor before. So this was a fun thing. This is another thing that we did, this radical thing of holding the banner in the parking lot up in Wyoming as we supported miners who had been abandoned by Peabody Energy. They spent their whole lives working for Peabody. Peabody spun off their mines. They were left without health care or retirement. These miners that you see here, the big burly guys are the coal miners. They had come across from West Virginia to Gillette, Wyoming. Tom Asprey, who you can't really see, but he's here behind the miner, kind of the bald guy. And I held up this banner with these miners. And for that radical act in the United States of America, we spent the night in jail. That's not something I've done before. I might do it again, but not just for this kind of an act. So if you want to hear this story, you can ask more about it. But this is, it's not unusual for us to hold up banners. It is a little unusual to be thrown in jail for holding up a banner. All the charges were later dismissed. But, actually, we do have this thing called free speech in the United States. And the judge, even up in Wyoming, was like, this was a photo op. You can't put people in jail for a photo op. And but it took 1.5 years for that to happen. So what I'd like to do is take just a minute. We're on Zoom, and that always makes it a little complicated. And I appreciate that people are muted. You might, I don't know if we can do this, if we have the bandwidth. I would like to try, because I always think it's most important to get you all engaged rather than just me talking. And so if you can turn on your video, and then if you're willing to hold up the number of fingers of how concerned you are about climate change. If you're not concerned at all, you can just kind of hold your hand flat. 1 means you're a little concerned, but not very much, and then all the way up till 10, you're just like, I'm really, really concerned. And I would be grateful to kind of get a sense of where you all are in this. Okay, very good. I'm seeing some people weighing in. If you can figure out how to, find the little video picture and you do that. And we'll see. Very good. Zoom has benefits, but also has, the ones I'm seeing are up around our 10s. And what I'd like to do is to see, Barbara, maybe if you're, since you're, thank you for figuring out the little ding dong, whatever it was. I see you with 10 fingers. Would you mind sharing with us why you're concerned about climate change? If you can.
This is Marilyn Ayers, and I'm with the League of Women Voters of Arapahoe and Douglas County. I'm a retired analytical chemist, and I basically did a lot of work in the radioactivity realm and did auditing of laboratories out of state and stuff like that. But I'm very concerned because I have lived in Colorado since 1966, and I have gotten what we call intermittent asthma, and I think it's due to the dirty air. We have dirty air, and I'm so upset about it. I'd like to do something about it. Most of the people I talk to work. There are so many people. I guess I'm going to probably get into trouble. But I'm going to say most people that get their bread and butter from an oil and gas company believe that there's nothing about climate change or weather change or what's happening to us. So, and they don't see that. And then I also worked for universities and did research for professors at CSU and the University of Wisconsin and Kansas State. So I'm ready to do something, but I'm not a talker, and I don't write all that. I don't enjoy that so much, but I want to see something happen about this air because it's bad. And the oil and gas people always tell me, well, no, it's not happening. We're just having melting of the glacier ice. And when I talk to the academic, people, that is not the case. Okay, they believe that.
Thank you, Marilyn. Thank you so much. And yeah, we'll circle around to that. I've left time at the end, so we'll have these conversations in more depth. But I'd love to hear from one or two other people. Like, why are you concerned? You could be doing other things tonight. Why are you here? Why are you concerned? Why? Thank you again, Marilyn. Why are some of you holding up 10 fingers? I think I might ask Barbara, since you're or Norma, is somebody you want to jump in?
Well, just very quickly without taking up time. I take the New York Times, and I think it was in the Times where I just saw in the last few days, couple days, that scientists are saying that the climate crisis is much worse than we thought. And that's a sobering thought to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Very good. Anybody else want to jump in? Anything in particular that you like, oh my gosh, I'm just so worried about this, that, or the other thing?
Thank you, Leslie. I'm Jean Walter, League of Women Voters of La Plata County. And unless it rained in the last 2 days, Southwest Colorado is in the middle of an exceptional drought. I think we're down to extreme right now because it has rained in the last 2 days. The West is burning up. There are dozens of fires burning in the West, and it doesn't even make page 1. Hundreds of thousands of acres are burning up, and it doesn't even make page 1. People, other animals, and forests are dying, and what we're doing is a drop in the bucket, and that is why I give this a 10. Thank you, Leslie.
Jean, thank you. And I'm paying attention to the drought in Western Colorado, and my heart breaks for everybody from, the fruit farmers to the reservoirs to the forest fires to just plain water supplies. And so thank you for coming in from La Plata County down there. Thank you. One or two other people want to kind of share why you're concerned, what you're concerned about.
So I agree with Jean. She said everything I was going to say.
Yeah,
The
Norma,
fire-
thank you.
Yeah, the fire's destroying our forests and the animals, and oh my God, that's, yeah, it's got me really alarmed.
Norma, where are you located?
I'm in Centennial, Colorado.
Okay, very good, yeah. But you're paying
Arapahoe-
attention, obviously. So thank
Right,
you.
Arapahoe County, yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
excellent.
yeah,
Very good. And I will say that when Arapahoe County weighs in, League of Women Voters representatives from La Plata or Arapahoe, anybody but Boulder. I mean, Boulder folks have been at this for a while. And so, but Arapahoe County, when people show up from Arapahoe County and say, I am really concerned, it is a huge help for us. So I want to do that. Let's see if there's one or two other people that would like to just kind of share their concerns or what they're thinking about, or it's always a little complicated with Zoom, but we'll just see what we can get done here.
Leslie, I'm Cindy Sestridge with the League of Women Voters in Denver.
Yeah.
And water is the big issue. I'm hearing more and more about our oceans, how they're being destroyed because the water is getting too warm. And then we are a watershed state. So I'm very concerned about our drinking water and the health of our rivers and farmers. We derive our food from water also. So it's not looking bright in the future.
Yeah, Cindy, thank you so much. Very, very helpful and very, very distressing, right? I mean, that's why I resigned my job 20 odd years ago, and my husband graded all those papers and we've lived, we're not about to starve or anything like that, but I'm not earning any money doing this. So very good. Any one or two other folks? We've covered a number of the bases. There are many more to be covered, but obviously when we're talking about water, when we're talking about losing our forests, we're talking about losing our coral reefs, which support some very high percentage of the fish populations, which then support very high percentages of people, because that's where they get their protein. And we're talking about many of the world's major cities becoming inundated between sea level rise and, storm surges and all of that. So, we've just seen Western Germany, whole villages just wiped out, 100 bodies somewhere, lost somewhere. This is all extremely serious. The fires are just, I love the woods, so they're especially distressing to me. So with that, I think, is there anybody here that wants to say, listen, I'm not concerned about climate change. There's nothing to be worried about. You never know. I want to just leave that open because, I've certainly spoken to a lot of groups where that's the case. So not so much anymore, but when I began 20 years ago, people would go, oh, you're just, carbon dioxide's good for plants. What's your problem? Very good. Go ahead. Somebody was going to jump in here.
yeah, Leslie, I heard something, I think it was on Fareed Zakaria GPS on CNN this past Sunday, and I mentioned this to Barbara, that most of us thought that with global warming, it was on a gradual scale, but it's beginning to look like it's more chaotic, and we have these extreme, unpredictable weather events rather than a gradual increase.
Yeah. And Norma, that's an excellent point. And it's really when I realized that back in 2001 and 2002, because I used to teach about climate change in the 80s and the 90s when I was teaching. And I taught all sorts of things and how many days above 90 you'd have in Denver. And back then I wasn't in Denver, but I used Denver was the example, how many days are going to be above 90 in Denver. And I remember writing on the blackboard. But when I realized this about 20 years ago, that you have these non-linear changes, it's you kind of think, oh, well, what's 1 degree warming? Maybe it'll be 64 instead of 63. Who cares? Well, clearly that's not how the planet works. And we can now see what one of the early climate scientists warned us of, Wally Brooker, way back in the 70s, said, the climate is like an ornery beast. If you poke it, it's gonna be bad. And so when it's 116 in Portland, we can see that this isn't going to be just sort of like a gradual little thing. When we have fires, as we did last fall in Colorado, that grow 100,000 acres in a day and jump the Continental Divide as the East Troublesome Fire did and threatened to come through Estes Park and just wipe out Estes Park. It snowed and rained and stopped that. But short of that snow moving in, the firefighters pretty much thought Estes Park was gone. It didn't end up being gone, but it was a very close call. So yeah, these are nonlinear events, and we haven't listened very well to the scientists up to this point. So there's hundreds of things I could have included, but these are just two of the pieces of news from today, that the ozone is not just unhealthy for sensitive groups, but it's unhealthy for everyone. Ozone is obviously a complex mixture. We've got nitrogen dioxides, we've got sunlight, we've got heat. It's intersects sort of with the climate issue, but since we all breathe all day long, it's really important. And then on the right side, we can see, I don't know where, pretty much wherever you are, it looks like southwestern Colorado is maybe not 100, but most of the rest of the state is in the 90s and the hundreds. And those of us that have known Colorado for a while know that, yeah, once in a while you get weather like this, but not like we get now. So, and the fires again are terrible. So now here's an important question that I think you all know, have some sense of, but it's not well comprehended broadly. The young people get it, but we have to think about, is it going to be better in 10 years or 20 years or 30 years? It's a little hard because I think, I would like to be able to see your kind of visual responses, but I'm just going to say, no, it's not going to be better. And so as we think about future generations, I think it's just so important to remember that, as frankly, as miserable as it is now, as bad as the drought is, as terrible as the fires are, as threatened as the ocean is, as hot as it is, it's going to be a lot worse for our kids and our grandkids. And it's this that I remember and helps me find my voice. I think Marilyn said, I'm not a talker. Well, I'm not a talker. I'm a scientist, for crying out loud. I want to be in the back corner of a lab working on a problem that only 2 other people in the world understand, and nobody knows my name. But, that's not going to help us address climate if I just, as I say, talk to the shower head. I have to do more than talk to the shower head. So if you know anything about me, you know that I've given now probably hundreds of talks, but it's not my nature. My nature is shy and retiring. So this is the next question. And again, if we could see each other and if we were in the room together, I think a lot of people would be nodding their heads. Do you have people, places, institutions that you care deeply about? And I ask you to take this very seriously, because this happens to be our grandson. So of course, I think he's cute enough anyways. So as we frankly gather our courage to do the sorts of things that we saw Julie Zahniser and Connor May do in that picture I showed you, it's really important in my mind that we think deeply about the people, whether it's your children or your grandchildren or your nieces or your nephews or some young person that you care about, a place that's very special to you. Maybe it's a place by the ocean or a place in the woods or a place in Colorado or a place wherever is special to you, or institutions, even democracy, right? We can start to see that climate change threatens civil society, because you can only knock things down so often before it's hard to maintain civil society. And I ask you to keep those in mind, because what I'm going to ask you to do is to talk. I don't frankly care whether you want to talk or not. And if you can't talk, right, but find some way. And if you don't know how, we'll help you. We've helped hundreds and hundreds of people kind of overcome, like, oh, I care, but I don't want to talk. And Tom Asprey was one of those. And now some days we have a hard time getting them to be quiet. So this, of course, is the sort of the basic science. This is carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. We can see that it varied over the last 100,000 years, something called Milankovitch cycles, the way the planet cycles around the sun, makes it either warmer or cooler. Carbon dioxide is like a temperature gauge on the planet. And for most of us on this call, this is our lifetime that we're looking at. When I have an audience filled with a bunch of guys, I sometimes say, if this was the temperature gauge on your truck, would you be concerned, especially back in the early years when not many people really, they sort of thought maybe I was crazy for thinking about climate change. And if I asked them if this was a temperature gauge on your truck, would you be concerned? These big burly guys go, well, yeah, I'd be really concerned. So this is the temperature gauge on our planet. So no, this is not going to be a gradual process. We have, as a society, not paid attention to the scientists. And as individuals, we have not done enough to move our country and our society as fast as we can. And this graph tells us, frankly, that it's going to be terrible because it's still going up. You know, when I started, we were under 380 parts per million, and now we're coming up on 420. So, you know, we're not reacting in the way that we need to. I sometimes talk about the bathtub overflowing. Our atmosphere is overflowing with carbon dioxide. If your bathtub is overflowing, is it good enough just to turn the flow down a little bit? No. If your bathtub's overflowing, you've got to turn the whole thing off. And that's what we need to do with carbon dioxide. And it's a big, big task. And when I took it on, I just shook my head because I'm like, this is impossible. We basically run the whole country on fossil fuels and we've got to stop. But we've made a lot of progress. I'm excited about the progress. There's a lot of exciting and good news things happening, but we need to move faster because we're still going up 2 parts per million a year on carbon dioxide. I'll just pause a minute to see if there's any burning questions so far. We'll have time for discussion. I'll stop sharing my screen at the end and then we can kind of just chat among each other. This is a graphical version of what I just said. Here on the left are the historical carbon dioxide emissions. If we want to have about a 2/3 chance of keeping the planet below 1.5 degrees C, we need to be on a very steep trajectory downwards. And that's only for a 2/3. As some of you may know from the science, if we go to 2 degrees C, we lose basically all of the coral reefs. If we can keep it at 1.5 degrees C, we maybe only lose 90% of them. It's a huge difference. The planet is very likely to recover. All the big extinctions in the past, I've spent a lot of time reading about them. Climate, you know, the coral reefs come back. It takes several million years, but they're one of the first things that comes back usually. But that's not going to help our kids and our grandkids because the planet works on cycles of millions and tens of millions of years, not 10 years and 100 years, which is what we would hope for our children and our grandchildren. Again, just pause. If you have a burning question, just, you know, unmute yourself and just jump in.
Question for you. I've noticed and also read that the global warming is accelerating faster than the scientists have thought, you know, 5 years ago. For instance, as the permafrost in the Arctic melts, it is releasing a lot of the methane, which exacerbates the global warming, which makes it just makes a faster cycle.
Absolutely. Yes, Jolene, you're correct. And, you know, the truth is there's a lot of climate scientists in Boulder, and I know quite a few of them, and they have been beside themselves for the last 15 years. But they're scientists. So when they write in these very scientific ways. But when you are with them, they're very human and they've been profoundly concerned for, you know, since the 60s, but they've been really profoundly concerned for the last 15 years. I've watched several of them go through pretty severe depressions as they've faced all this. So, yep, it's really, 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 really serious. And it's more serious than, because again, there's so much political, you know, blowback that they had to be extra careful in their reports. But what they really think is that it's going to be much worse than their reports have told us. So the next couple of things are,
I was going to say, as the ice melts, the ocean becomes darker, which absorbs more heat, which melts more ice, which,
yep,
you know, again,
yep, positive feedback cycles are there and they're serious. And this is why we need as many people as possible to step up. to overcome, to find your voice, to speak. We'll talk about that at the end. Just to kind of underscore here that when we look at cumulative emissions, the United States is at the top of the heap. This is not the place anybody wants to be, but it's where we are. I believe it gives us an extra moral impetus to speak up. And we're also highest in terms of per capita carbon emissions. So these are all the reasons why I personally sort of learned to quit being shy and to start speaking up, and why we've tried to help as many people as possible do that also, because we have this, I believe, just really outsized moral obligation to do that. Bringing it down to Colorado, I like to use this graph. The truth is there's an updated version of this, but they don't use the nice little graphic. So I think Cindy has her hand up. And Cindy, if you'd like to unmute yourself, just jump in.
I wondered if you're going to put in your presentation here, what kinds of methods we have to recapture CO2.
Thanks, Cindy. That's a good question. Are we going to discuss ways to recapture CO2? And the answer is no. I am not going to speak about that. We could talk about it during question and answer a little more.
Okay.
But it is so, as a chemist, you're trying to do the equivalent of make water go uphill. It's very hard to do. There are ways to do it, but we're highly unlikely to be able to do it at a price or a scale that will have a big impact for our children. So since we're still putting out a lot of carbon dioxide, I focus on getting us to stop doing that, carbon dioxide and methane and other greenhouse gases. I focus on that. I hope that carbon capture is able to help a little bit, but I believe it's misplaced to think that somehow we can just put it up there and then our kids will figure out how to get it back down. Just chemically, you're trying to reduce carbon dioxide. That's very energy intensive. That's going to be very hard to do. It's going to be very expensive. You can do it, but it's like trying to make water go uphill. It'll be hard to do. It'll be difficult and expensive. So that's sort of the short version. And I'm grateful for anything we can do to get carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, but I don't think we should put our hopes there. So again, I would love to be able to have more of an interactive thing, but it's a little hard on this format. But I would just ask you to take a look. This is Colorado's greenhouse gas inventory, and I would ask you to kind of take a look at this circle and sort of see what's the number one source of emissions in Colorado. And this is just from last fall. It's changed just a little bit because they refined it a bit, but it hasn't changed dramatically. So you can see that the largest segment here is still here in the upper right, the coal that's used for electricity generation. So you're going to hear me talk a lot about coal because this is still our largest source of greenhouse gas emissions, our single. Then if you were to look around for the second, you'd probably go, oh, it's down here in transportation at passenger vehicles. We're going to talk a little bit about that and hope that each of you can think about, moving towards an electric vehicle when the time comes and if you can manage it. But that's a little harder because everybody, you got to kind of buy a new vehicle and that's not cheap for folks. The other thing I'd like to point out is that although this oil and gas sector, and we had, I'm not finding my notes right now, but we've had a little discussion about oil and gas emissions. Most of these emissions are going to be methane, and methane has a global warming potential, GWP, that's 80 times that of carbon dioxide over 20 years, which is really the proper level to consider it. If we did proper accounting for methane, this sector would be much bigger. 350 Colorado has been doing a great job of leading on this, but it's very difficult, as you know, once you've let the cat out of the bag on oil and gas, it's very difficult, and we're facing that. We're not like New York, where they just said fracking's too dangerous. We're not going to allow it in our state. We didn't do that in Colorado, and now it's, you know, we've got over 50,000 wells. So those are kind of the big sectors, and there's all the little ones. Here's part of the answer to, are we making progress in Colorado? And the answer is absolutely yes. You can see we did a lot of things that in the first decade, and then we started to had a little bit when, I think this is maybe when Evie Hudak was in the legislature. We did a lot of these sorts of things. Then there was a gap when we had a Democratic House and a Republican Senate. And year in and year out, we'd all do all of our work in the legislature. And when the session was done, basically nothing would happen. In 2019, you probably know we elected Governor Polis, a Democrat, Democratic House, and a Democratic Senate under the leadership now of Leroy Garcia from Pueblo and Steve Fenberg from Boulder. And since that happened, we've had a host of legislation on all of these issues, on electricity, on transportation, on buildings, on oil and gas. And I could walk through, but as Amy said, each bill kind of has good and bad. They're kind of a mixed bag. And I'll be honest, I'm a chemist. I'm looking at actual carbon dioxide. We'll see how all these words on paper play out. I'll be doing my part to make them play out as well as we can. But I think you'll probably all been around, you know, long enough to know that it's one thing to pass a law and put words on paper, and it's another thing to actually make it, you know, kind of work out. So I'm really excited about this. I'm really grateful. We've got some great legislators. And to the extent that we have support from legal women voters out of Arapahoe County, out of La Plata County, out of, you know, all of these frankly non-Boulder places, we'll move even faster. So if you have questions about this, I would suggest we kind of save them till the end. But the short version is, we know what the words on the paper say. We don't know how that'll play out in the real world. But we're making progress, and I'm really grateful. I'm especially grateful to League of Women Voters. Just wanted to point this out. Long before we had a state inventory, we had a Boulder inventory of our greenhouse gas emissions. This came out in the early 2000s. We kept trying to kind of just tug down on this line because we had said we were going to meet the Kyoto target. Finally, a group of us did this radical thing, which is we put a text box on this, and we said, what's this blue stuff? Oh, the blue stuff is electricity. And we just put a text box to identify it. And then we really helped our community understand that it's electricity that's our largest source of greenhouse gas emissions. We're now in 2020, electricity and transportation are pretty close, but it's still electricity that we can kind of work on collectively. Transportation, you know, you can't tell everybody, well, just walk or ride a bike, because not everybody can do that. Just buy an electric vehicle, not everybody can afford to do that. But we can all afford to work together to decarbonize our electricity. And then as we move towards more electric vehicles, they'll be running off of cleaner electricity. So this is one of the many reasons why I focus primarily on electricity. And I'll just pause to see if there's any kind of burning questions. I will say that in Boulder, on this next slide, we have worked very hard, and you can see that we've had very significant reductions, both on a per capita and a per GDP basis. We met our 2020 climate goals 3 years early. And this has been a big community effort. And if you live in a community where you can pull together a group to help your community move forward, it really also really helps move the state. Because frankly, when we bring people from Boulder down to the state capitol or down to the Utilities Commission or down from anywhere, we do our best and we turn out a lot of people. But I'll tell you, one person from Arapahoe County or from Arvada or from Westminster or from La Plata County or wherever, one person there is worth 50 or 60 people from Boulder. So I'm begging you all to help us. This is a quick historical version of the work we've done since I began. When I began, the paradigm on electricity, again, largest source of greenhouse gas emissions, was coal is the way to go. Coal is cheap. We've got 200 years supply of coal. We're going to burn coal for 200 years at least. And we'll do a little bit of natural gas, but it's more expensive. So it's coal. When I began, Excel was way over 60% coal generation, and they were less than 5% renewables. And if I could have made this picture smaller, I would have, because any talk of solar, wind, storage, demand shaping, all of that was just frankly laughed at. And I could talk about that for a very long time. We spent 15 years of incredibly hard work, people like Julie Zahniser, Connor May, Tom Asprey, and hundreds of other people, Shirley Jin. And, you know, I happen to love winter, so I actually really love this picture. But it was kind of a long, cold, hard slog. And I kept telling the team, it's 99% failure, 1% success. We're going to succeed. And when we succeed, no one will remember who started it. And that's why you succeeded. So like I say, I love this picture, but it was long, hard work. Grateful to people like Shirley Jin and her husband, her late husband, who supported us in the early years. And the good news is now that we're in 2021, everyone, including Excel, knows that coal is on its way out and that we are headed into the solar era. Solar, wind, storage, managing our demand so that we match our demand to when the sun is shining and the wind is blowing. And these, pretty much everybody gets this now. Even in the legislature, we don't get very much pushback. We get a little bit of pushback on coal, but not much. And so this is a huge accomplishment. We have absolutely shifted the paradigm in the state, but we're still, from the inventory you saw a few slides ago, we still have way too much coming from coal. So wanted to put this out to help people understand why this is so important. If you go to what's called the EPA Greenhouse Gas Calculator, or the sources of all my slides are at the bottom, usually in white. 1 million tons of carbon dioxide, a typical coal plant puts out usually 2 to 4 million tons of carbon dioxide a year, but I just try to do it as 1 million tons as a base. If we can keep a coal plant from putting out 1 million tons of carbon dioxide, it's like having taken over 190,000 cars off the road, passenger vehicles. It's also like having taken 164,000 homes, putting them on solar and eliminated their use of electricity for a year. We took them off grid and made them completely solar and storage. And if we don't stop it, we owe the planet 15 million tree seedlings that we grow for 10 years. And although all of these things are important, my husband and I ride our bikes a lot. We run, it's actually a Volt, but because we only have one car and we don't drive it that much. Our house, we've done all sorts of things on it. We're part of a solar garden, all of that sort of thing. But there's nothing that this team of us that are here tonight could do that would get 190,000 cars off the road for a year. You can't go to your neighbors and say, just don't drive for a year. You can maybe hope that your neighbors will put up solar, or you'll put up solar if you haven't, but there's no way we could get 160,000 homes to do that. And there's no way we can plant 15 million trees. I've done quite a bit around tree generation and all that, and I think I have a few thousand trees to my name. 15 million is completely impossible, and we'd have to do it again the next year. But if we work together, we absolutely can keep 1 million tons of carbon dioxide from going into the air. And, the team that we've assembled, I should probably do this calculation, but there are at least 15, let's say 10, I'll be careful. There's at least 10 million tons of carbon dioxide that are not going into the atmosphere now that would have been if we hadn't worked so incredibly hard. So that's a big deal. Take all these numbers, multiply them by 10. And that's the work we've done by finding our voices, by showing up, by doing the writing, by speaking to our friends and everyone else. So just to give you a quick, and then we'll kind of wrap up we'll try to wrap up around 6:30 or so. So I'll go kind of quickly through this. So we'll have time to at least have a few minutes to do question and answer. I have the time, but I want to let everybody else get on with their evening. The fact that I was able to cross out these numbers on this old slide that I use and replace them with these numbers is a very good sign. Again, it's all these people working together and talking together. And The Hayden 1 and 2 coal plants put out about 2 million tons of carbon dioxide a year. So you can multiply that and you can see how many years that we're keeping them offline. And that's 2 million tons a year about. The easier one to do here is the coal plant up in Brush, northeast of Denver, Pawnee, been offline because they had a fire in it. But you can see these 14 years, and Pawnee puts out about 3 million tons of carbon dioxide a year, and we're very likely to take about 14 years off of its life. I think we might even take more. We'll find out over the next year or so. And obviously Pueblo Unit 3, the coal plant that Xcel calls Comanche 3, big coal plant, came online in 2010. Huge mistake. I've spent a lot of time fighting this coal plant. We have now had its life cut in half. So basically 30 years. And Pueblo Unit 3 puts out about 4 million tons a year. So 30 times 4 is 120 million tons. So take all of those numbers that we just looked at and multiply them by 120. And every year that we can move this earlier, Xcel is proposing to only operate about a third of the time during the 30s. So that's good. But in the 20s, they plan to operate at full time. They're probably not going to, because people like me and a whole lot of other people are going to oppose it, and we think we're going to prevail. But every year that we can take it off of full operation, we're saving 4 million tons of carbon dioxide going into the atmosphere. That's a huge thing. Take those numbers, multiply them by 4. This is where we get the big carbon reductions. And voices from Arapahoe County and La Plata County and everything else, every other place that's represented here tonight, is huge in helping us do that. And the good news, although it's not always easy to talk because, like I say, I'm a scientist. I don't actually want to be talking. I also have a paralyzed vocal cord. It's difficult and painful for me to talk, but I keep doing it because this is where we get the big carbon dioxide. So let me pause and see if there's any questions. I'm going to skip over a few things because I want to kind of I want to show you a few things and then kind of move on to some question and answer. I'm a scientist, so I like to have original sources of data. There's a lot of numbers here, but I'll point out a few of them. If we come below this line in the middle, these are bids that were given to Xcel in 2017 and 18. Xcel was looking for about, let's call it 500, 800 megawatts of wind. They got 16,900 megawatts of bids, and $19.30 a megawatt hour is the same as 1.9 cents a kilowatt hour. That's the median price. So that means the median price was under 2 cents a kilowatt hour. Fossil fuel generation is 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cents a kilowatt hour and above. So these projects are, let's call them virtually all in Colorado. There might have been 1 or 2 in Wyoming, but not many. We'll come down and look at the solar 4 years ago, let's call it 3 or 4 years ago. Xcel got 14,000 megawatts of solar bids at about a median price of about 3 cents a kilowatt hour. This is stunning. And you could even get solar with storage for under 4 cents a kilowatt hour. This is the solution. Xcel is moving in the right direction, but I'm going to show you the next slide. The red bar is the number of bids that Xcel took. They took about 2,000 megawatts in total out of these, when you subtract the top part, out of about 50,000 megawatts. 2 out of 50 is the same as 4 out of 100. So they took about 4% of the bids. And I cut the bids in half completely arbitrarily, just assuming that half those bids are bad. That's not the case. Xcel took this many, and even if we throw out half of the bids, they left this many, minus the little red part. So the solution is here. As we add more of these, you get to a limit somewhere up around 80% renewable electricity. Xcel is currently, I'm going to show you 1 or 2 more slides and then we'll be done. Xcel is currently around 30% renewable. And the solution is sitting here. It's been sitting here for years because I could show you this data going back to 2009. That's not quite as dramatic as this, but it's pretty dramatic. And the reason we're not doing it is there isn't enough pressure on Xcel. And again, every million tons that we keep out of the atmosphere is a really big deal. It's the biggest, most powerful way. We also have a big methane problem in this state that also needs a lot of work. But this is a huge way to do our part on the climate crisis. These are generally lower costs. This is Boulder. We went out and we found that we could get to 100%, we could get to 89% renewables by 2024, and we would save about 40 million a year. If we wanted to get to 100% by 2030, we'd save about 30 million a year. This is why Boulder worked so hard to break away from Xcel. Then the pandemic came and our council got panicked. And but you can see that not only will it be cleaner, higher percentage of renewables, it's going to be cheaper. There's other providers that are going to move faster and do it at a lower cost than Xcel. That's part of why one of the bills that we passed last session was a bill looking at community choice energy that would allow communities to go to market, look for electricity that's lower carbon, higher renewables, and cheaper. So it's cleaner and cheaper. You know, what's not to like about that? This is Xcel's proposal. I'm going to do that. I'm going to, I think, use this slide, and then we'll just kind of break and see what questions people have. Where we are with Xcel, and I work with Xcel people virtually, certainly every week of my life, and sometimes every day of my life. They are really good people. There's nothing wrong with the people who work with Xcel. They are really good, competent, hardworking, caring people. They're working for a monopoly, and their job is to protect that monopoly. I mean, that's what they get paid to do. Doesn't mean they're bad. It's just, you know, the way the system's set up. In Colorado, this is for Public Service Company in Colorado, which is Xcel in Colorado. Here's the service territory. Last year, 2020, Xcel had 588 million in profit, and they were still 64% fossil fuel generation, 26% coal, and 38% natural gas or methane. So this is sort of the foundation from which we work. And just to kind of get things going, I may come back to the slides, but I think just so we can look at each other, I think I'm going to stop sharing and see what questions people have. But I will say that one of the things that we'll be doing this fall is training people to speak at the Public Utilities Commission to help us move this electricity paradigm faster. Again, there's a lot of things you can do, but the biggest thing is to keep millions of tons of carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere by accelerating the rate at which Xcel is moving forward. And so I think now I'm not sharing, and we can open it up for questions. And if we need to, I'll go back to showing slides, but I guess the thing you can know is that if I say something, I'm a scientist, the data is there. And if you want to see the data, I'll show you the data, but I'm a sort of a data hound. So again, thank you for this opportunity. We'll be looking for people. Shirley will know and probably reach out to Beth and all. We'll be running trainings this fall. And again, if we get a handful of people from the League of Women Voters to show up, it's one person from the League of Women Voters in Arapahoe County is like me turning out 60 people from Boulder County. So I'm begging of you, when you hear that call, to show up for the training and then show up for the Utilities Commission hearing. We've done great work in these public hearings at the Utilities Commission, and we intend to keep doing that work. And we have a very sympathetic commission now. So the more people that show up, and especially if you're not from Boulder, the more it helps them make the decisions that they want to make. So that's kind of my plea. So having said all that, again, thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for being such a great audience. And I'm happy to have questions or discussion or, you know, whatever is useful to people.
Cindy, looks like Cindy has a question.
I do. Leslie, is there anything coming from, you know, the big wealthy people who are trying to do things about world problems, like the Gates Foundation or Elon Musk or any of these folks? Are they putting money towards this at all to help?
Absolutely. It's a great question, Cindy. Thank you. Yes, the billionaires, so to speak, so they spend some time going to space, but they also are putting lots of money. And sometimes the money I question, like Bill Gates has supported advanced nuclear. And there's a lot of reasons we don't want to do that, including all the reasons that most of us know because we were kind of went through the nuclear fights a while ago, the radioactive waste issue, the safety issue. And nuclear is not flexible. We need flexible resources as we go forward because the wind comes and goes and the sun comes and goes, and you need to match those with flexible resources. We're looking for long duration energy storage. And obviously Elon Musk has devoted his life to this in a sense by making electric transportation happen. Now we have a lot of the big car makers, you can go to almost any car maker. Toyota's dragging their feet, as you probably read about today or in the last couple of days. But most of the big car makers, Ford just come out with the Ford F-150, which has a battery that could run your house for 3 days. That gives us great opportunity because most of the time cars are sitting in garages or parking lots or wherever. And if we hook up our vehicles to our grid and use them as storage devices and also to back up the grid when we need to, and these are the kinds of things that the next generation can and will solve. And the big billionaires are spending lots of money supporting the development of these technologies. I disagree with especially some of Bill Gates' decisions, but he's got billions. So if he throws a few $100 million at what I consider the wrong thing, he's still spent a lot of hundreds of millions on other stuff that is going to be helpful. So yes, they are. And Elon Musk is obviously more than a bit of a character, but the fact that he has made electric transportation acceptable and desirable, lots and lots of Teslas in Boulder. I don't know what it's like where you are, but I just see a lot of Teslas and I can't afford one. I'm not going to buy one, but the early adopters are here and that's going to help drive down the prices. And it's forced the big auto companies to say, we need to go electric too. And so that's really exciting as we go through this decade. Technology is going to change dramatically and it's very exciting. So great question, Cindy. Thank you. Sandy.
Do you have any idea why Toyota did what they did?
Why who did what they did?
Toyota.
That's a good question. No, I mean, I'm not privy to, the boardroom conversations in Toyota. I think, they led the way on the Prius, right? For many of us, love, we, have lots of friends with Priuses and love them and plug-in hybrids. I think they sort of, it's that leapfrog thing where, they got started and then they kind of got committed down that road. And then in a sense, they got leapfrogged by battery electric vehicles. And they have sort of felt like having hybrids and hydrogen was the right path to the future. If you've read, I think it was in the New York Times in the last day or so, and lots of stuff online about it, they're sort of getting a lot of grief about it. But the good news is we've got Ford and Nissan and, Hyundai and everybody else moving forward. But it's a little sad about Toyota because a lot of us have I have a deep appreciation for what they did with the Prius. And hopefully they'll catch up. I think they have a lot of partnerships with other companies that are where they'll kind of end up with a battery electric vehicle that maybe will have the Toyota brand on it. I'm not like a super expert on this, but it's a good question. Thank you. I see what's called Judith. Is that Judith or?
That is Judith.
Hi.
So I'm in Colorado Springs and the county commissioners in Pueblo announced last week that they're going to look at nuclear to replace coal.
Oh, geez.
Yes, thank
I
you.
shouldn't laugh.
Yeah.
I'm in the middle of that. So yes, I'm sympathetic. Did you want to make a comment about that, Judith?
No, I
I'll respond.
want some ammunition to confront them and tell them this is not the way to go.
Thank you. That's helpful. Bless the folks in Pueblo. They're always up against a lot of really tough stuff and they just keep stepping up. They're the best activists I've ever worked with. I adore them and appreciate them so profoundly. So they are organizing already. They have a nuclear-free Pueblo. I can't quite remember the name. Jamie Valdez with Mothers Out Front has been calling those groups, but all the old timers, you know, Velma Campbell and lots of, I'm spacing out now, I know her, Margaret Barber and a whole lot of other people, Tom Corlett and David Cockrell, they're all working hard on that. In terms of just resources, Judith, you might look up the Union of Concerned Scientists, Advanced Nuclear. Maybe you've already found that. But Union of Concerned Scientists did a nice report that advanced nuclear, it's advanced in some ways, but it's not necessarily better. And adding your voice in, especially, you know, League of Women Voters, again, Colorado Springs, very helpful. Thank you. I'm aggravated by it for sure, because it's distracting Pueblo from doing what they need to do, which is to advocate strongly with Excel for transition funding and programs. We're not going to burn coal in Pueblo till 2039. The coal industry is in a death spiral, so you know that's not going to work. And the nuclear thing's not going to work because it's too expensive and it's not flexible and it's just a PowerPoint presentation at this point. It's got years and years and years of permitting and zoning and every other thing. So they're just grasping at straws. I frankly, sort of halfway off the record since I'm saying it here in public, I'm quite frustrated that former PUC Commissioner Frances Concilia has thrown her weight behind it. Frankly, she should know better, and she's not helping her community. So that's a big issue. I'm not that worried about nuclear coming to Colorado because I think we'll have hundreds and thousands of people who'll say not in my state. But it's a distraction to Pueblo. It's not likely to work. And Excel's trying to protect their profits from the big coal plant down there, what they call Comanche 3. And frankly, they're using Pueblo as a human shield to protect their profits. I have a slide to that effect, but it's a couple $100 million by doing it the way they're proposed instead of the way we should do it. And it really aggravates me that, one, that they're putting their profits ahead of the planet when it's clear to everybody that we're burning the planet and frying and ozoning and every other thing, you know, destroying the coral reefs. And you're protecting your profits by saying you're going to burn coal till 2039. Ask me how I really feel about that. I'm livid, as you might imagine. And then to use the community of Pueblo as kind of your human shield, getting the leaders in Pueblo to say, oh, the only way that we can make this work for Pueblo is to burn coal till 2039. Well, it's not going to work. They don't have a coal supply. It's uneconomic. It's unrealistic. It's unflexible. It's too expensive. We're not going to burn coal till 2039, but they're getting the leaders of Pueblo, Leroy Gashi and a bunch of other folks, say, oh, we should burn coal because that's the best thing for Pueblo. Well, that's not going to work. So thank you for your help on that. Start with the Union Concerned Scientists and just throw your voice in because that'll help, and appreciate you doing that very much. Thank you. I see Marilyn. Marilyn, let me just see if there's somebody on another screen. Marilyn, yeah, please.
Well, you know that France, they generate 80% of their electricity by nuclear. I'm more in favor of nuclear. That will be an option in the future. France gets 80% of their electricity from nuclear because you're spinning heating water and you're spinning all the equipment to make electricity. So
yeah,
people that I talked to, I worked in that area as a chemist, and I'm not a nuclear engineer, but I heard a lot of things that were of interest to me that I think someday that this will work. You could have smaller units in like a county or something like that, and you get zero. And you can also take things that have you could use a different isotope, radioactive isotope, to be the fuel. And you can take, you can move it different, not build them all the same way. So
Very good, Marilyn. Thank you for jumping in. Obviously, you know, we each have our opinions. I think time will tell whether nuclear is going to play a role or not. And, you know, if I'm wrong, I'll be happy to admit it for sure. I mean, I'm very concerned about the waste. We have all of this nuclear waste sitting in basically swimming pools at our 120 nuclear reactors. And, you know, frankly, most of us on this call are going to die and leave that problem to our kids. And, you know, what are they going to do when those swimming, you know, they're called spent fuel storage containers, but they're basically swimming pools. When those start to decay and fall apart and they've got all this waste that we've left them, when that's solved, I will be happier to think about the next generation. Although we really need flexible resources, and nuclear is not very flexible. You need to be able to turn it on, turn it off quickly. And as a big steam kind of engine type generator, they're not very, and again, the Union Concerned Scientist has taken a hard look at this. So if anybody wants to drill down further, just search Union of Concerned Scientists, Advanced Nuclear. You'll find their relatively recent report, came out in the last few months, I think. So, you know, we'll find out, Marilyn, and if I'm wrong, then, and if we're both still alive, my experience is that nuclear is always 10 or 20 years in the future, and it's been that way since I was 20. So, and yes, you can, you know, the original generation, but we haven't actually solved the problem of waste yet. And
In Japan, they first have prototypes to show how they can do this. So there's a lot of research that needs to be done to get all of this to work. But we have ships out on the ocean that are nuclear powered. And they're not big ones. I mean, you know, they're not like something in Chernobyl.
Yeah, very good. Well, thanks for throwing that in. It's good to have the diversity of opinion. Thank you, Marilyn. Other questions or comments? You can either raise your hand or unmute yourself and just kind of jump in. And the thing one of the slides I didn't show, I would like to mention a group called Colorado Communities for Climate Action. I'll say it again, Colorado Communities for Climate Action. And their website is CC4CA, Colorado Communities #4 Climate Action. So CC4CA, if your community is not part of CC4CA, one of the things that League of Women Voters could take on would be, you go to their website, you can just see which, you know, we've got Aspen and Boulder and 30 odd other communities and counties involved. But the bigger that group gets, it's good because it's the communities, it's the city of Boulder, it's the city of Denver, it's I don't know if we have Arapahoe County. I should, but you can look, you know, it's Fraser, things like that. If somebody wants to look it up, somebody has put the link in the thank you for, it looks like maybe Beth, you've done that. Thank you. If your community is not part of Colorado Communities for Climate Action, it would be very, very helpful. And they have a sliding scale. So if you're a small community, your dues are smaller. But what you're really doing is banding together. They have a lobbyist at the Capitol. I've heard that maybe could be a little better, but whatever. They do have a lobbyist at the Capitol. And they have elected officials show up regularly to testify at the Capitol. And again, it's very helpful when we have elected officials from North Glen or, you know, places like that, Thornton, on and on. And it's a pretty doable thing to get your community engaged. And it's not super expensive. It's a cheap way for them to get some good climate representation at the Capitol, at the Utilities Commission, elsewhere. So you might take a look at that as an important project that the League of Women Voters could take on as a way to accelerate our progress in our state. Very good. Other comments? I don't know if Amy wants to throw in more about you know, what's gone on at the Capitol, She spent a lot of time there, I think. Or anybody else. And again, I just want to thank you. The league is a very important player. And when you show up, it has a huge impact. And
Just want to say that members of the League of Women Voters, this is Amy Sherwood speaking, all of you can find our position that we take on bills if you just go to the Colorado Capitol Watch, and you have all the categories of all our positions in all of the different topics that we follow bills in, you know, whether it's health, education, children's rights, reproductive rights, all of that can be found on the Colorado Capitol Watch site.
And there are easy links on our legislative action page on our website as well. So
That's
thanks
great.
for that, Amy. And thank you, Leslie. This was just really fantastic. I'd really like to thank Barbara Dungy and Shirley Jin. This wouldn't have happened, especially without you, Shirley. Thank you. And Barb, really appreciate all that you did today. But Leslie, really appreciate it. We will be in touch. This is the beginning of a beautiful friendship between our organizations. And we do have a couple of events next week that I'd like to point out. We do have a new member orientation on Tuesday. So if you have any new members at the local league level, please send them our way so that they can understand the relationship between local, state, and national, and we can share resources. We will be doing these on a quarterly basis, so don't worry if you missed this one. Thanks, Barb. Also, the next night, next Wednesday, we'll be sharing the results of our recent strategic planning session. We held that on July 17th, and we'll be talking about our objectives for the year. So hope you can make that one. We'll of course be following up at Making Democracy Work Day on September 25th. So stay tuned to hear more about that. Yes, this video will be posted on the LWVCO YouTube channel. Like all of our videos, we've got quite a library there now, so I encourage you to explore it. Any other comments or questions before we head out for the night?
I came late. What organization is Leslie associated with?
I'll let Leslie answer.
Hi, Judith. My home organization is Clean Energy Action. We work at the local, state, and national level. We keep our budget really low, and we try to empower other groups. So we don't have a big brand thing going on, but I work with many other groups, from the Sierra Club to 350 Colorado to Solar United Neighbors to Colorado Solar and Storage Association. It goes on and on and on. Colorado Climate Action Network, Colorado Coalition for a Livable Climate. So I have my fingers in a lot of pots, but we began Clean Energy Action almost 20 years ago to oppose the big coal plant in Pueblo, because the other groups were supporting it. Sierra Club supported that plant, which was sad.
Wow.
They've changed their course now, but it took 15 years to get them to change their course. So that's been sad. But now they've got great folks. I'm really pleased about that. So Clean Energy Action is my home group, with fingers in lots of other groups. And so grateful to you all, and would love to have you show up. Shirley's spoken at the Utilities Commission many times and always does a great job. And I, like I say, one voice out of Arapahoe County or La Plata or wherever it is just so valuable to us. So when you hear that notice, when that notice comes through, we'd be super grateful if you joined us. We'll do a little training, kind of explain what's going on. And then we have it's just really fun to watch the testimony unfold. It's really cool experience to be part of that team.
Excellent. Well, thank you again. And I hope everyone has a lovely evening.
Thank you for the opportunity. It's great to see you all the way we see each other these days. Take care.
Thanks so much.
Appreciate you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.